My piece of advice is none of the adults alive today know what the hell is going on and what the future is going to look like.
Yeah.
So don't listen to any of their advice, including mine. Feel what's deep inside of you, what's yearning to be born, and just go for that, and go for it with such commitment that you don't have a plan B.
Welcome to the Driven Young podcast with Byron Dempsey, dedicated to educating and inspiring the younger generation around entrepreneurship and practical life skills we aren't taught in school. Created for young people who seek direction in establishing their goals and passions. This podcast provides a platform for discussing the steps taken by professionals in their field related to handling finances, making money online, starting a business, growing a network, and much more. And now your host, Byron Dempsey.
Welcome back to the Driven Young podcast. This week's episode is super powerful. Today I'm joined by survival expert and trained psychotherapist who runs camps and retreats in the Australian bush for kids, young adults, men and women. We actually met at a camp years ago, then reconnected when I went on a men's retreat with him, and we had to survive overnight in the bush with nothing but a blanket. Today we discuss Lee's story, how he got into survival, what he's learned as a psychotherapist, how he was able to reconnect with himself after spending a year in the wilderness alone, the different ways men and women show emotion, and much, much more. This is a jam-packed episode, and I really enjoyed listening to it whilst I edited it. There are so many awesome takeaways, and I really hope you enjoy. Now, over to Lee. All right, Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
Super excited to have you on.
Yeah, good to be here.
So we're going to talk about the bush, everything you've been up to lately, get into some masculinity, talk about toxic masculinity specifically. But before we get into that, I just wanted to talk about how you got to where you are. What did you do when you finished high school, and what are you currently up to?
How did I answer that? I didn't really like high school, was the first thing, I guess, and a lot of the time it sort of felt like it's kind of a prison. And I think it was particularly rough, probably, like when I talk to people in Australia and hear about their experiences, it doesn't seem to be, literally I could get into a fight for holding the wrong person's eye for too long.
Yeah.
And you either had to knuckle down and obey the pecking order, or you had to get into fights. And I would often get into fights, and then it sort of escalated up into like 16, where I was like, there were guys who just had much less to lose than me. And the last fight I had, we both were like punch drunk at the end. And then that dude went on to stab someone in a pub 3 months later. And
Really?
I was like, yeah, I think that I need to like get out of playing that game.
And where was this?
This is in London.
London, yeah.
And then, so my parents had separated by that time, and my dad was living in Cambridge, which is like a little country town. So I said, I'll go live with him for a bit and try and get out of this. And spent a few weeks sort of trying to barge people in the corridor before I realized no one was playing that game out in Cambridge.
Yeah.
I was just being an arsehole. And after that, I went to uni in Scotland and had a great time. I had this kind of renaissance of myself where I felt like I'd been kind of just playing a role and pretending like I had friends, like flitting between groups of friends.
In high school?
In high school,
Yeah.
but never really feeling like actually I was connecting with people, or that I shared the values of any of those folks. And then, at uni, realizing, holy shit, now I actually get to sort of be the adult that I want to be. And what kind of adult do I want to be?
You can kind of control your own life.
Yeah, exactly. And then started making friends that actually felt like good people, and I felt like safe around, and were actually fun to hang out with.
Yeah.
Stopped kidding myself that I enjoyed weed, because it just made me super anxious. And so yeah, that was a good time. During that year at uni, I went to the States. They did a study abroad program.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to this, like, American unis are so different. I turned up, it's like the level of funding is just through the roof.
I know, it's crazy.
50,000 seater sports stadium on the campus and stuff. And they had all these amazing programs that were in film and theatre, where you just got to make film and theatre. So I dropped all the programs I was supposed to be taking, which were to do with English language and English literature. I just didn't do those programs. I just cancelled them, and I went and did film and theatre instead. And during the summer holiday, I went and did a course with this guy, Tom Brown, who runs the track school in the States. And I'd met someone in England who'd sort of worked with Tom. And Tom is a guy who had been mentored by an Apache Indian for like 10 years when he was a kid. And then spent another 10 years just sort of wandering in the bush, making everything. This guy who
10 years.
Yes, yeah. 10 years sort of in and out, like not consistently. I think from the outside, his parents just thought he was like a long-haired hippie bum who kept on disappearing for stretches at a time. But when he disappeared, it was with a stone knife and with buckskins that he'd made, and was living off the landscape. And the guy, the Indian that mentored him, Stalking Wolf, said that if you have a metal knife, that's not survival. If you even have a metal knife, you may as well be camping in Disneyland. That's too easy. So when they were getting mentored, they'd had to strip off their modern clothes and put on their buckskins, and it was full Stone Age living. So I went and did a week with this guy, and realized, holy shit, this is all of the. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Yeah. All of the skills that all of our ancestors used to have. And that's true regardless of what continent they came from. You know, for the vast majority of most of our family tree is hunter-gatherers. And this feeling of sort of completeness as I was learning these skills, like, whoa, like to be able to light my own fire by rubbing sticks, and the feeling it has to, like, to know I can go off into the bush and light a fire if I want to, or get close to an animal if I want to, or even bring it down for food, build shelters. There's this amazing feeling of relief. It's like, okay, well, now I have an out. Like, I can still go and get a job, I can get a mortgage, I can get a house, but also there's this other option too, where if I want to, I can leave all that behind and go and have playtime in the bush, and all I need is people to come with me. So it was hard going back to my degree after that. I was like, what am I doing in this place?
Yeah, so when you did that was like a eye-opening, this is what I want to do. Yeah. So that it was as simple as that. As soon as you did it and you realized that's what you wanted to do, kind of like it was like an instant feeling.
Yeah, this feeling of, for right now. I mean, I think like my whole life I've been kind of pursuing that feeling of, for right now, what's the juiciest thing now? What's the most reward for the least effort? Yeah. And at that time, right then, it was that.
Okay, cool.
And so then going back to, I hummed and hawed. I had like another year of my degree left, and I was like, do I want to go? Maybe I should just drop out. Is this degree studying? Actually going to be useful? Well, good theatre question.
And film.
Well, in practice I was. On paper I was supposed to be doing English lit. I started off doing... See, here's the thing. Originally I thought, well, I'm going to be a doctor, a medical doctor. You get to help people. You have to be quite intelligent. I like the idea of being intelligent, and you get paid well. So my parents will think that's a good profession. And then as I was doing my like HSC equivalent, they call it A-levels in England, I realized I hate all of this. Like the chemistry stuff is boring. I'm not really into the math so much. Maybe I just like people. Is it okay for me just to be a psychologist? Is that okay?
Just help people.
Yeah. Am I allowed to just do that? And I was like, okay, yeah, actually, apparently I am. So I started a psychology degree. About 6 months into that, I was like, I hate this. This is like what dead white guys used to think is true. Now we know it's not, but we don't really know what's true. So we're just going to have exam questions about this plus some statistics. I was like, this is terrible. Maybe what I actually really want is just to understand humans better. And English literature seemed to have a bit more kind of wisdom about how humans work. So I switched to English lit, and I thought I'll train as a psychotherapist, because then you don't need to do all the statistics and stuff.
It's good though that you kind of realize this. A lot of people would have, after 6 months of being a doctor, they'll be going, I'm not enjoying this, but I've already committed so much time and money into this degree, and they just stick with it, and then 10 years later they're working a job that they don't enjoy.
Yes.
And that's so dangerous.
Yeah, I think it's really dangerous to be too much of a good boy. It's actually, it's terrible to be too much of a good boy. My parents were, they couldn't control me. Like I was, as a teen, I was just off the chain. Like I would be coming home high and saying, hey, I'm high, don't talk to me. Like, screw you. And like, the worst kind of most horrible behavior. And my mum would go passive aggressive, and my dad would go explosive, but then he was out of the picture. So I sort of got into this habit of being a bad boy, and realized how freeing it was. And I think as I sort of got older and more mature, I sort of dropped the antisocial, aggressive parts of it, and realized actually at its heart, that archetype of being a bad boy is it just means I'm not going to be on other people's leash. You're
not following
to the
system that other people want you to follow.
The beat of other people's drums.
You're creating your own system.
Yeah,
which
is something super powerful in that.
100%. This is what this podcast is all about.
Cool.
Is, if you want to follow this, if you want to be a doctor and follow the system, and because you want to help people, you love the math, you love the chemistry, you love kind of getting into that stuff, great. But if you don't and you want to help people, don't do it because your parents want to do it, as you said, or because it's a high paying job, which is the most common two, I would say, parents and money. Yeah. Create your own path. And you say that's kind of like the bad boy or whatever. Yeah. And so there's a good side of the bad boy, but the bad side is the, coming home high, being antisocial and all that stuff. Yeah. And so with maturity, you kind of got rid of that, but still had the advantage of doing your own thing.
A bit of freedom, yeah. And I think what it meant was that I was allowed to pursue what I actually wanted rather than being pushed into something. It's sort of, in a weird way, it let me sort of be more in touch with what was actually happening inside of me and what I yearned for rather than what I thought I should do.
It's also a cool point. You went from studying for medical, and then you went to psychologist. And so you took these leaps of going to this and then, no, I don't want to do that. Well, it's probably only like a year of your life, which is not much considering you're trying to discover something that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. Yeah. But because you took those leaps, that's what led to you coming across the Indian and doing that week in the bush, which has now led to where you are now. Yeah. And that's what we talk about, stepping stones. Just do this, keep putting your foot in the door, keep figuring out what you want to do. Nice. And eventually it's probably going to come.
Nice. Yeah. I like the image of, they talk about how if a plane is flying from New York to London, for the vast majority of the time, if it's going to London, it's not actually pointing at London. It's doing course corrections, and most of the time it's actually pointing somewhere elsewhere. But overall, it's getting there. I think that, like often in life, we just have to walk roughly towards the thing that we're going towards. And then once we sort of get there, we realize, oh, actually, no, that was just to get me here. And now I need to go in this direction.
But you're still moving in the general direction.
I'm moving in this general direction towards this destination, which is like my truest fulfillment, my actual realization. And I don't even know what my London is. I just know for right now, it seems to be over here. And then, oh no, actually, yeah, for right now it's this, for right now it's that. And the only way I actually can steer my ship in that way is just what feels good, what feels right. 100%. And if I'm listening to what I should be doing or what other people are telling me to do, I can't hear that properly, or it's too scary. When I had this realization, whoa, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to make stone tools. I want to chase around after animals and build cubby houses and teach people how to really be at home in the wild at a Stone Age level, not just a Bear Grylls, holy shit, I got to run back to the hotel level. I was like, whoa, is this okay? Is this safe? Am I allowed to do this? Like, what I'm talking about here is jumping away from a career as a psychotherapist or whatever.
A safe, guaranteed income, a guaranteed pathway, which is great because it's stability. Mm-hmm. But it is a big move to go from that to something that doesn't really exist, I think.
It was like literally stepping off the beaten path into the bush. Yeah. And in the wilderness, there's no path. So I was like, this actually seems insane to one level of me. But the other part of me was just like, this is so exciting and so compelling and so juicy. I just have to do this. It's like, is this or bust? I don't care. Balls to the wall. I'm just going to do it, and I don't care.
But you could tell that you're heading in your London direction when you were doing this.
Yes.
You could feel, oh, this feels right. Yeah. I don't know where it's going to go. Yeah. But if I just start heading this way,
something about it.
I'll end up in Australia with a business that specializes in teaching kids in the bush and all that stuff. Yeah. And so, I think it's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now I'm in a position where I couldn't have imagined the job that I have now. Couldn't imagine like what that would look like and how I could make that work. But this year I've been teaching other people how to do it. And so it's like, just deciding to jump off the path and make my own path. I made the thing that is my life, and made it sort of strong enough that other people are like, yo, actually I want to do this too.
Yeah. And I think what you'll find is, anything that you're passionate about or most people are passionate about, you can find a way to create money from it or to create a living from it. Even though it's like, how do you create a living? I went out in the bush for a week. How do I turn this into a way I can make money? Nice. I don't know. How do you do that? Obviously, you can't just say right now. Yeah. And it could be whatever you're thinking as a listener going, oh, but I love doing this. I love Dungeons and Dragons. Then you create an online, community of people who love this. It's like everyone, the better the niche, actually, the better it'll work, I find. Because you've got those people who are like really passionate like you, and they're like, oh, I finally find someone similar. I love what this guy's doing. And so, as you said, it's scary to jump off that safe pathway of being a psychologist and doing something completely different, but obviously it's probably worth it.
Yeah. And I think whatever you do, even if you follow the path that society is pushing you towards, or your parents, or even the voices in your head, it's going to take hard work, and it's going to take commitment. It's going to take time. You may as well be doing that hard work and commitment and time for something that actually is fun and helps you to get up in the morning rather than is a dick drag.
Yeah. And I understand. For me, my parents let me do whatever, right? They trusted me. They guided me in anything I wanted to do. So I understand I've got an advantage over a lot of people, but I've met people who have parents who are so strict. It's like, you have to do this degree. And I'm like, can't you just drop out? And they're like, no, I can't. And I'm like, why not? Can't you just talk to them and say you're miserable? I've tried. It's like, what do you mean? How could your parents not understand that you're miserable? It like blows my mind. But that's how some people have it. And so if they're listening to this, they can probably go, yeah, that's easy for you, Byron. It's easy for you, Lee, with your parents. And I'm not sure what I would say. I'd say maybe complete your degree, and once you're free, once you see where you can go from there, try find your London. Try find what feels good. It blows my mind. Some people will talk to their parents and they just can't get out of it.
Yeah, it breaks my heart that some parents think that their role is to make boys and girls who are going to be good boys and girls and do the good boy and girl thing, and how much it actually breaks and cripples and is an obstacle in their lives.
Yeah, and it breaks my heart as well, because they think what they're doing is right. And I'm not an expert or anything, but I love the way my parents raised me. They didn't force me down anything, whatever, they always let me decide and discover. And that's how I learn. I learned by, really cool. As you said, you went to do a degree, you realized you didn't like it. You went to do another degree, you realized you didn't like it. And that's fine. That's part of life, is experiencing different things. The chance of you doing something you love and doing a degree first chance, or like just jumping into at the first go and loving it, is probably quite low. You've got to test the waters and see what's best for you.
Totally. Yeah.
Cool. It was a good chat. So let's jump into kind of some of the bush stuff. So you've got a business, which I've probably said it wrong before, but you do a lot of stuff in the bush with men and with kids and stuff. Can you explain a little bit about that and why you do that?
Yeah. So I actually got a few different there's a few different branches to what I do. One of them is Gum Bushcraft, which is rewilding, helping people to be at home in the bush and teaching really those skills that we would have known back in the day, and that our ancestors would have known, in order to fulfill our physical needs in the bush, feel safe, feel at home, feel like we actually belong there. We run family camps that are our main program, and men's survival trips, which is how we met.
Yeah. Oh, we actually met at the family camp like years ago.
Oh, that's right.
I did it with my dad. So that was like
that was the rite of passage.
Oh, the rite of passage.
Yeah.
That was, you were a leader at that.
That's another thing. Yeah. So we run rites of passage programs too. And then we do one-day bush school programs for younger kids. A whole bunch of stuff. We're doing nature mentor training now for people who want to run their own bush schools and things like that.
Cool. But the core of it is you're out of the civilization, you're out of the real world, the hectic world, into the bush where you're learning skills, you're connecting with other people, you're kind of just calming your brain down. You're removing technology, which is actually something we should all be doing.
Interesting. I actually just switched off all my notifications on my iPhone the other day, and I'm loving life right now.
So did I.
Oh, good. Isn't it great?
I set up a block on Apple. I get up at 6 a.m. most mornings, and I can't go on any social media or any apps until 10 o'clock. So the first 4 hours, I can get messages, but Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff is blocked.
That's really cool.
And then even then, it's a 1 hour block on all social media. Oh, not 1 hour. You get 1 hour combined.
Yeah.
And my mate actually goes to the degree of he set a passcode that only I know. And if he runs out, he's locked out. And if he desperately needs to go back in, he'll be like, Byron, can you give us a code?
Yeah.
But otherwise, he's out for the day.
Yeah.
Which is
awesome.
It's just, it makes it easier for you. You don't have to fight the system. Yeah. Just create a system that's easier.
I think it's a great example, because I think that really we're all learning how to live. Hey, we're all learning how to 100%. Live in the face of this new technology and in the face of how world is working with all these new systems and things, and I think it's the same way. Apparently people were freaking out with newspapers. I don't know if I said this to you last time we spoke, but when newspapers first came out, there were lots of people who were like addictively reading them compulsive for hours at a time, and people were like, this is the end of the world. No one's talking to each other over the breakfast table anymore. These newspaper things are stealing all of our lives. But then little by little, people sort of like relaxed about the newspaper things and learned how to read them a little bit, and then not have to read them cover to cover and not get too obsessed about them. And I hope that social media and our devices will be the same. Like they were so new that, like, to us who like grew up in the like 80s, 90s, noughties, it's like, wow, these things are just amazing. And we didn't really have the armoring to be able to just use them as a tool rather than be used by them.
And our brains like can't adapt that quickly. You know, it's been like, within the past 100 years, the change has been just phenomenal. And it's funny, I think I heard the same thing with books. Like, not just newspaper. Back in the day, people were like addicted to books, and they're like, oh, your brain's going to melt, stop reading books. Because I remember once my mum was telling me this when I was a kid, and I was just like, but you're always trying to get me to read books. It's like, it's completely swapped. And the newspaper thing is interesting, but I think the problem with social media is it's on us all the time. And so that's where the probably more dangerous side than the newspaper comes, is you've always got it. You can pull up the second you're bored, you bring it out, start scrolling meaninglessly. And so that's what I loved about the men's camp personally, was like, just kind of get rid of all that. It's first of all, it's completely removed. You can't access it. It's just, you know, you're communicating with other people and doing and working together to survive and stuff. It's really fun.
Nice. And I think that, well, what I've discovered from spending time alone in the bush or in small groups with the intent to go deeper is that there are kind of states of consciousness. There are ways of being human that we don't get to experience if we don't do that. And it's a shame if we don't know that they're there. It's like, if I know that they're there, then I can be like, oh, that's for me or that's not for me. But if I've never tasted that, I think it'll be sad to...
It's kind of like that analogy, if you know, like the garden analogy, the white wall or something. It's like you live in this beautiful garden, and but it's surrounded by this massive white wall. But you love everything that's in there, but you can't see what's on the other side. On the other side is a garden 20 times bigger that's even more beautiful. But you're happy with what you've got because you don't know what's on the other side. It's kind of the same. We're happy with what we've got or how we are. Or in a lot of cases, we're not happy. Some people are, in a lot of cases, we're not happy. But really, there's all this other stuff we're not experiencing. And so that's what you're saying. You can actually unlock certain parts. And because I think you mentioned, because you did a year alone in the Australian bush, didn't you? And I remember you were talking just about...
Oh, this is in American bush.
Oh, American bush. Yeah. And you were talking about, you know, after a few months, you started becoming in tune with everything. You felt different.
Well, yeah. First, I had a big meltdown. First, I had to sort of disintegrate. And
the shock, do you think?
Kind of fell apart. I think it was the lack of distraction. There wasn't anything to distract me from myself very easily. And I suddenly realized, whoa, there's grief in me, there's terror in me, there's rage in me, all kinds of things that I'd sort of been skimming along the top of like a skipping stone, and then distracting myself out of when it came up. Oh, I'm feeling a bit anxious inside. Let's call someone or let's do something.
So like temporary relief.
Yeah. And then without all of that, it was like the dam walls just burst, and I was just feeling everything all at once, and that was super overwhelming. And that was sort of the middle 6 months of my time there. It was quite a long time. During that time, I was like, oh God, what? I'm just crazy, or I'm just fucking this up. Like other people seem to go into the bush and have these great experiences and talk to animals and spirits and God. And and I'm just feeling like a nutcase. And then it wasn't until sort of the final 3 months that process kind of finished. And it felt like my emotional in tray was just empty for maybe the first time in my life, or not completely empty, but there was enough space that I could sort of like, that things could flow through. I could have a feeling, I could sort of feel that feeling and then let it go again. Whereas before it was almost like, if I think about my emotional system as like as a tube, it was like the tube had a whole bunch of stuff blocked. It's like it was full of cholesterol, emotional cholesterol. But somehow I cleared out my emotional arteries, and there was just flow, this feeling of, wow, I feel big, I feel spacious, I feel like it's possible to feel things but not get overwhelmed by them. I feel like I could sort of face anything and just kind of pretty much be okay. And then also feeling like I had access to all kinds of deeper sensitivities, like maybe intuition, or maybe just my physical senses were really expanded, but sort of knowing things without knowing how I was knowing them about the landscape, and having all kinds of cool encounters with animals, which I think often animals get freaked out by us because whoa, that dude's stressed. And our whole culture is built on that kind of stress. I really see it because I don't live in a city. When I come into the city, I always like, whoa, everyone's marching around so fast and spending so much energy, and everyone's lives seem so pressured, and every minute is like packed, and all these kids are having like so many after school activities. I think everyone's in a sort of a baseline level of stress, and we don't realize how unnatural that is until we see birds flying away from us, freaking out. I'm like, wait, what? I'm just walking through the bush. But no, actually, I was marching through the bush, and I had a scowl on my face, and I was thinking about the 1,000,001 things I have to do, or what that arsehole so-and-so said to me last week. And birds are like, whoa, what is that going on in that person's body? That's terrible. And so in that year that I had in the bush, that kind of process unraveled, and that internal blockage shifted.
Yeah. And you'd say it was a good thing. It was like just everything came out of you, even though you were kind of crippled, or like emotionally crippled for a bit of time.
Yeah. I mean, when I say emotionally crippled, like I was just assailed by big emotions, and like my thoughts were just going crazy. I suddenly realized, I don't have any control over my thoughts. But I think it had always been that way. It was just that I couldn't hide from that truth anymore. So yeah, it was definitely a good thing. Although it took me a year or maybe even 2 to sort of learn how to be a modern human again after that. I was rubbish at small talk.
Because you'd go days probably ages without talking, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Months even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also made me incapable of being an employee. I was I was not fit for a 9-to-5 job after that, which was kind of what helped me to set up my business, because I was like, well, it's just not an option for me to go be an employee. Yeah. How can I make my own business?
Yeah, so that's where you basically just went, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I'm good at.
This is the only thing I can tolerate right now. Actually. It's the only thing I could imagine doing every day, or as a way to make money. Yeah.
Yeah. How do I monetize this?
Yeah. And, I mean, that and the psychotherapy thing, which I completed my psychotherapy diploma just after that year. But at that time I was still quite young. I was in my sort of late 20s, and I'd have adults who are much older coming to see me, and I still didn't even really feel like an adult. So it took me a while to sort of relax into the psychotherapy and really feel like I could be a good therapist.
Yeah, great.
But yeah, I did the NICE program, the New Enterprise Initiative Scheme, I think. Do you know if you know about that?
No, I haven't heard of that.
It's a really cool, it's a government scheme. You basically get Centrelink payments and small business training at the same time. So if you want to set up your own business, it's a great way to start.
Jeez, there you go. That's good.
And that's what I did. And that's how Gum Bushcraft started.
So they give you little bits of payments so you can kind of survive and learn how to... Because as someone who's in business, like I'm running my own business, I've been a part of a community that helps other businesses grow. I've seen heaps and heaps. Running a business is freaking hard. And there is no training for it. Oh, there is, but it's not like official. It's, individual companies. There is no go to uni and learn. I don't know what a business degree you learn in it, but I don't think you learn how to run a business. Yeah. You learn a bit of accounting and stuff, which is great. Yeah. But you don't actually learn, how do I start marketing? How do I build different channels? How do I build systems? How do I onboard team? How do I manage tax? Because you have to pay tax at the end of the year and you're not paying it every single week. Yeah. Like it's so complicated. That sounds really good. Yeah. Well, this training, I mean, I think it didn't have a lot of that juicy stuff that you're talking about, but it did have tax obligations and bookkeeping. At least it's legal, what an ABN means, and the sort of the logistics of setting up a business. But then it was also time and space and a bit of mentoring to ask big questions like who's this for, and how am I going to structure my programs, and think about my price point and market research. But I mean, the core of it is if you have something you're passionate about and you want to start a business, there's not really an excuse when you've got stuff like this. You can get funding and everything. Yeah. I want to switch up into what I mentioned earlier on about toxic masculinity. Yeah. So I saw a talk on YouTube where you shared a story, and it was really powerful. Huh. And I just wanted to talk about, what are your thoughts on toxic masculinity? I know you're quite a calming person. When we talk in a circle, a whole bunch of men will open up, which I've never really done before, especially with other men. Huh. Like the whole... There's still an aspect of crying and showing emotions as a man, I think, that are still quite... Yeah. You should keep them bottled up. Totally. What are your thoughts on that? I think toxic masculinity often gets talked about as a way to say that it often sort of the idea bleeds in that men are fundamentally a bit sort of toxic. And I think that that's really sad and not true at all. And I think that
modern life is quite hard for men in a way that it isn't so hard for women. Because in a way, we could think about what's happened with modern life as it's like the village has just expanded, right? So now it used to be small villages, and then men would go off on little trips, hunting trips, and maybe women too, and women would go off gathering too. But I think that time outside the village is really important for the masculine to emotionally self-regulate. We know that we know from psychology, we know from studies that male toddlers tend to have more intense tantrums and last for longer. And there was one cool study where they had boys and girls in a room, and they said, hey, boys and girls, be quiet. There's a baby sleeping next door. We don't want to wake it up. And then after a little while, they started playing, the scientists started playing through the intercom sounds of a baby screaming. So the kids are like, oh no, we woke the baby up. And the girls said, hey, let's go get an adult. And the boys said, nah, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. And they switched off the intercom. But they were monitoring the heart rate and the skin conductivity, the stress measures of the kids. And
really?
the boys were way more freaked out about it at an emotional level.
Yeah,
they were really stressed. And I think that maybe, lots of people freak out about gross generalizations across genders, but I think maybe on the whole, male nervous systems are a little bit more sensitive, actually, and a little bit more easily overwhelmed by emotion.
Despite the stereotype.
Exactly, despite the stereotypes, and take a little bit longer to process emotion, and maybe don't lots of men don't tend to be comfy processing emotion by talking about it. There's other studies that show often, on the whole, women tend to be more relaxed after they get to share about something that's distressing.
Once they've released it out of them.
Exactly. Whereas men often are a bit more agitated. It's often not enough just to talk about it. Men need to work it out physically, going for a run or doing a workout or whatever it is. And so I think a lot of the time that outside of the village space was a time where men got to connect with men got time on their own, men got to sneak around in the bush with a spear, and they were sort of releasing emotion and having quiet time and spaciousness away from the chaotic hubbub of the village, which I think on the whole, female or feminine nervous systems are a bit better adapted for. So if that offends anyone, I'm sorry, but that's my feeling of it.
No, I tell you, you're basically saying, that's when hunters and gatherers, hunters were out. That's when the men could, release. That's when their emotion came out, and that's when they could be physical. They could release it now. But what you're saying is we don't really have that anymore.
It's very hard to leave the village.
Yeah.
Now we spend all of our time outside the village, and a big part of why I do those men's survival trips is so we get some outside of the village time.
Because fact is, when you're at the pub with the guys, sure, you're with other men, but you're not talking about this stuff. You're not releasing. You're not being physical. I mean, might be some fights or something, but you're not doing kind of what we did together at that men's retreat. We sat in a circle and just kind of spoke and just talked about what's going on.
Yes.
I think because there's a lot of judgment. That you create a safe place where people can do that without.
Yeah, there needs to already be an existing culture where we understand what it means to speak openly and to be vulnerable about that, and how we can set up structure so we can feel safe about that. Because the other thing I feel really strongly around men is, I heard Brené Brown saying this, and I heard her saying, I was like, whoa, that's spot on. She's saying the greatest fears that men have is being seen as weak or being weak. Yeah, and our culture has all kinds of sort of ideas about what it means to feel emotions and cry and things like that, and so we don't want to seem weak.
It's true. I don't want to seem weak.
No, of course not. Yeah. And I think a lot of arguments often I see in between men and women. I do couples counseling now, and often the really big arguments, the man's not backing down from something because he feels like the woman, when she's upset, she just wants to express and say, hey, when you do this, it's really difficult. Why did you do that fucking thing? Why have you been acting like an asshole? How come you can't support me more? Or how come you're not around more for the kids? And the underlying thing that he hears is, you're weak. You're not up to scratch as a dad or as a partner. And it's very hard for me to just sit there and listen to that and say, oh, I see, honey, I'm really sorry that you feel that way. Much easier for me to go into defense and say, whoa, hang on a second. No, actually, I'm fine because I did this for you and I did that for you, and explain why I'm actually a strong person, when really she just needs to vent, and what's on her mind isn't at all that I'm a weak person. No, but it's like it's terribly vulnerable for me if I feel like that's the message.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating stuff. Because even when you say just about bringing weak, like I don't want to feel weak, but I think there's a difference between being weak and letting your emotions out isn't weak. And that's kind of like the message we're trying to get across.
Exactly. And being vulnerable, that's that thing that Brené Brown's always harping on about, which is that being vulnerable is a strength.
Yeah.
It takes courage and it takes grit to be vulnerable. Just
not in modern society. If you cry or you let yourself out, people can see you as weak, but really, you know, you are being strong. And for anyone listening, if you can try to understand that, I think it's also hard, like, you know, if you're surrounded with people who also understand that, it's pretty beautiful because they all do it and they're not going to judge you. Yeah. But if you're with people who don't understand that and they're
it's not a good idea to be vulnerable about people who don't understand. It needs to be the right time and place. Like, it's not necessarily a good idea to just cry when I cry all the time. Yeah. Hey? And but it is important to make sure that there are times and spaces in my life where I do just get to be me, and to be seen in that by other humans, and to be accepted for that, like warts and all. Because if I don't, I mean, really, then I go through my whole life feeling like I'm hiding, feeling like maybe I'm a fraud somehow, or I'm having to put on a mask, or that if I am actually who I am, then I won't be accepted. Yeah. And that's a terrifying and miserable way to live. And I think a lot of people do live like that, but definitely. Hopefully like there comes a time if I'm in that mode where I just realize, actually, you know what, this isn't living anymore, and so I got to push through this and find a place and a way to actually be myself and be real all the way down. Yeah. Say the unsayable, feel the unfeelable. And
it sounds like you're a big believer in kind of having your own time and kind of being happy with yourself. Yeah. Because I know a lot of people, like, even especially with social media, and I've had it as well, you're constantly kind of needing to talk to someone. Yes. And sometimes I'll be like, okay, just put it down. And it's like since I've done this for 4 hours in the morning with no social media, nice. It's kind of like, this morning I had nothing to do, so I just started journaling. Beautiful. And then I went and meditated, which, you know, sounds really cool, you know, kind of cheesy and stuff.
Not at all.
But like, I had nothing else. I was waiting for the train and I had half an hour to kill. Normally I just sit on social media, but I kind of just spent some time alone with myself.
Beautiful.
And
perfect.
You know, that it was very easy because I'd set up the systems that blocked it. Yes. But it's quite powerful. And obviously you spent a year on your own, which was very powerful, as we heard.
Mean, not completely, but yes. And I for me, my mental health plan is I get up at 5 because we got a young daughter, and I work from home a lot of the time, so it's easy for me to sort of get caught up in the hustle and bustle of village stuff, parenting and being a partner and emails and blah blah blah. So I get up at 5, and then that time is my sacred time, where sacred in the sense of nothing else intrudes on that I don't want to be there. That's just my time to relax, to let the dust settle, to appreciate the sunrise, listen to the birds. I'll meditate as well. And incidentally, you know, Tim Ferriss was saying that he felt like the single thing that was a common thread between all the high performers that he talked to was meditation. Was like the main thing that all of them had. Yeah. So it's like, it's definitely not, I mean, it's not very mainstream and maybe seen as a bit foo-foo, but I think it's so powerful that if you're serious about performing well, you need to be looking into it.
And I've been getting into it. It's hard. I find it hard. Just especially starting out, like, my brain's moving a million miles an hour sometimes. And I'm like just trying to, you know, I use an app where they like just kind of.
Which one?
Calm.
Oh, cool.
You just hit play, and for 10 minutes, she'll kind of talk you through it and like how to kind of guide you, and she'll also stop talking. And so I try to use that. Once again, make it easier for yourself. Block social media. Get an app to help you meditate. Yeah. And after you've done it probably 100 times, you need the app.
Yeah. I really like the Waking Up app. Oh, yeah. Which is another one that Tim Ferriss recommends. But and also recognize that meditation isn't about stopping the thoughts. It's just about seeing what actually is there. Yeah. It's not about trying to be something or some way that I'm not right now. It's about saying, okay, actually, what is there right now, in a really really honest and open and compassionate way. And that's radical. You know, like, otherwise most of the time I'm like, I'm tired. Oh, I shouldn't be tired. I need to like find some energy from somewhere. Or I don't really feel like writing this email. Oh no, but I got to do this thing. Or like I should be talking to my partner right now. I should be doing this. Or I really should go to sleep now. We spend so much of our time in that should mode, that the state where we're actually saying, okay, what actually is the case? What actually is happening inside of me? What do I actually want right now? What I'm actually feeling and thinking? And I don't have to act on any of that right now. All I'm doing is just sort of taking stock in a really curious, really sensitive, really subtle way. It's really important, and it's really rare, and it feels so good. Yeah.
And it takes taking time for yourself, as we're kind of linking back to that thing we said before, because I know people, and I've done this as well, I'm not nothing special,
Yeah.
but like you constantly got to be talking to someone or somehow engaging. I was like,
Yeah.
and I remember I've done that before. I've been talking to heaps of people or whatever, and I'll just put my phone down and be like, just calm down, just have some time to be yourself. Even my friend, she was studying abroad and she's just been sharing a dorm with someone for so long, and then she came here and stayed with me, and I had 2 mates staying on the couch, so we had lots of people, and she's just got her own place in Bondi, and she's like, I haven't been this relaxed in so long because I've just been able to sit and kind of be by myself for like long periods of time.
Nice.
And I know a lot of people won't do that.
Yeah.
The same thing. I'm getting an Airbnb in the Blue Mountains at the end of the year just to set my goals
Nice.
and everything. Just because
cool.
like just kind of go through, plan everything out.
Really cool.
And I think there is a lot of power in just having time to yourself. You don't need to be, your girlfriend won't mind if you take a day off without talking to her or whatever it is.
No, and she might be upset, but it's like what's right for you is going to be right for her also in the long term. Like if she actually needs you on your game as much as you need to be on your game. Yeah.
And if you say to her, hey, I just want to have some time to relax. I mean, if she can't understand that, I think that'd be quite rare.
And it's part of the feminine archetype to reach out and seek connection and want to connect deeper. And masculine archetype doesn't always want that. And we have to find a balance. And I think there's this idea in the Apache tradition when you're making fire, you got to spin 2 sticks together, and they say that the upright stick represents the masculine, and it's drilling down towards the feminine, making friction, and the friction is what makes the fire. And they say masculine and feminine are opposite. They're really different, and we're not supposed to understand each other, and it's not supposed to be easy. It is supposed to cause friction, but the friction is what makes the spark of life. What causes heat. It's what makes the passion come.
Yeah, good metaphor.
Yeah.
You're banging them out. First the London metaphor, now the fire metaphor. Awesome. I think talk about another thing we mentioned just before.
Yeah.
So you're talking about storytelling. This is kind of like, I think it'll go back to that London metaphor. You've gone this way, and you're just mentioning to me before what really lights you up right now is writing and storytelling, and you're kind of retelling some stories from your life.
Yeah.
Do you talk a bit about that? What do you find is so exciting about that versus?
Well,
what you've been
I think
doing?
that it links into what we've been talking about, because that mode that you were describing, where I'm really agitated and I'm flitting from one thing to another, and I'm always feeling like I got to be connecting to someone or doing something to feel productive. I think of that as a stress trance. We humans, we have this amazing capacity for trance, and trance just means any kind of focused attention. But trances can be pleasant and they can be unpleasant. So in a way, like if I'm meditating, that's a kind of a relaxed trance. It's like an expanded trance where my focused attention is on expanding as much as possible.
Yeah.
But if I'm stressed, then this stress trance is really narrow, and that's such a tangible thing. Like it's such a real thing that soldiers who are super stressed, they get tunnel vision where they actually literally can't see to the sides, outsides. And I think something similar happens to us humans when we get stressed. We narrow in on something, and it's not until someone says, gently takes the device out of our hand. It's like, hey, hang on a second. How about you just have a bath and get some food? And you're like, oh yeah, that's right. My body, like I have been needing to piss for a while. I was locked in that trance. And I think this modern life is teaching us about how to use trances better. And I think that when that time alone enables us to go into the really deep expanded trances where we can access a quality of ourselves and a quality of thinking and clarity that we don't get to do otherwise. And it's not a question of just saying like, well, just concentrate better, just focus more. No, if I'm on the bus, or if I got kids screaming at me, or if I've got like my phone is going off in my hand with all these notifications, there's no way I can access those deeper parts of me. And I think part of what I hear you describing is learning how to sort of drive this organism that's me. And part of that involves working with trances and understanding trances, how to design my life so that I get the kind of trances I want, like deep, nice, relaxed, focused trances, and less of the stressed, agitated, being pushed through my life kind of a trance where I'm running around like a blue-ass fly. How does that relate to storytelling? I think that any trance has its own story. So part of what locks me into that stress trance is the story that I got to get everything done on my to-do list. Life is a little bit dangerous, and if I'm not performing well enough, then people are going to judge me, or I might get attacked, or my life might fall apart. Yeah, my reputation's going to be impacted. So I'm really I think stories are just so powerful. They kind of are the water that we swim around in, and I've always found them really kind of compelling. And so on the family camps that we do, we'll do storytelling in the evenings, And I look at them as it's how you build culture, really. Stories, I mean, culture is just all of the stories that we agree to sort of believe and enact together. And so when we're telling stories, I'm interested, what are the stories that are nourishing to us, that empower us, that give us a more spacious and freeing view of life, versus the stories that make me feel more unsafe in the world, more pressured, more in competition with other people.
Otherwise known as the news.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah, I stay away from those stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't watch the news. I mean,
Yeah,
I'll catch it on social media every now and then.
Yeah.
Like I know this volcano happened in New Zealand, which was crazy.
Yeah.
But like it's classic, the volcano, the fires. I know there's bad stuff going around, and everyone wants to find out about it. But the news is just full of, negative stories versus versus what you're saying, which stories that enrich us and grow us, and help us grow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the news is instant doorway to stress trance. And I think that there's a shortage of stories that are nourishing at the moment. I think there's a shortage of storytellers who understand the responsibility of a storyteller, which is that stories really, when we're listening to a story and we're deeply engaged, and that's the same whether it's like a nice conversation that we're in, or a movie that we're watching, or someone reading to us from a book or reading a novel, we're in a deep trance at that moment, and the way that our brains work is that's a programming state. Those ideas are going in at a deep level. That's why you have 40-year-olds now who are still wearing Luke Skywalker t-shirts, and secretly a part of them thinks that they're a Jedi still. Yeah, and that's beautiful. That's a really nice, empowering, rich story, and that story went in at such a deep level. It's right at the very core of who that person is when they wear that t-shirt, and that happens all the time. That's why it's really dangerous with psychotherapists. If we got to listen to all these like really depressed, anxious stories all the time. It's a known thing, a burnout, because it's really hard not to take on someone else's story if I'm giving them my full attention, because I'm going a little bit into a trance state, and when I'm in a trance state, I'm open. I'm getting programmed a little bit. So
and it beats away at you. Negativity after all these bad stories, just going again. You got to listen to all these bad stories.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the environment will dictate your performance or how you feel. And so I can see that would be really rough if you're going through consistently listening to all these bad stories versus on the flip end, good stories.
Exactly. If we want to be able to perform well and live the life that we want to live and feel empowered and safe in the world and energized, we need to be saturating ourselves with stories that support that. And so I'm interested in there's a lot of stories that we've written just for our family camps, and they're mostly like reworkings of folk tales, because a lot of folk tales I find a little bit, they're either misogynist or they're just too violent, or they're kind of like moral propaganda that doesn't really suit anymore. But we've kind of been reworking them for modern lives, where it's a bit more nuanced. It's like, how do we live our lives? How do we be good humans? We're all kind of working this out at the moment. And I think there's never been a greater need for some stories that sort of get us where we're at, and that we can sort of wholeheartedly give ourselves to. There's a lot of the stories, like the big stories that we're listening to and seeing at the moment, there's so much violence, there's so much intensity, there's overwhelm that's inherent to them, and there's a lot of unsafety that's inherent to them. Especially for kids, I'd like to see more stories that are just nourishing and empowering. I don't think there's very many of them. And I also like the idea of sort of reclaiming our ability to tell stories, because at the moment the implicit thing with kids is, if you want to tell stories, it has to be through video, it has to be through a screen, and you better have a good production budget. And the really best stories are massive pyrotechnics and CGI and things like that. But if you have a good storyteller and you have a connection with the audience, you can create all of that through imagination. And I'm excited to bring that more into the conversation.
I don't know if you heard this movie Get Out. No. Well, it was basically a really small budget, but then it blew up because it's an amazing movie.
Amazing.
The story is so good. And I'm a big fan. It's one of my favorite movies, and it had like a $20 million budget, but it performed at this at a $200 million budget level. $20 million is still a lot, right? But compared to these other movies that it's competing against, it's nothing. That's like the price they pay for one actor. And so same with Red Dog. I don't know if you remember Red Dog. That was a really small budget, but it blew up all through storytelling. Nice. And it also, I think what you're saying right now also links back to the beginning of you figured something out with the bush and stuff, and you followed that. Now storytelling is lighting you up, and that's what's making you feel really good. So now you're pushing it into that direction. And it's like you might not going to find one thing that's going to satisfy you forever. I don't think so.
No, that's right. Yeah.
And so it's just finding one thing and then moving to the next. But so long as you're heading in that London direction,
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, exactly. As long as I feel like I'm growing and learning.
yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Lee, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Before
Thanks
we
for
wrap
having me.
up, I have one final question I ask all my guests, which is, what would your number one piece of advice be for the younger generation? It can be around anything. Doesn't have to be with what we talked about.
My piece of advice is none of the adults alive today know what the hell is going on and what the future is going to look like.
Yeah.
So don't listen to any of their advice, including mine. Feel what's deep inside of you, what's yearning to be born, and just go for that, and go for it with such commitment that you don't have a plan B, and reach out for help along the way as best you can, but just keep running towards that thing that you're yearning for, and don't listen to any of the other voices.
Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. And where can people find you if they want to find out more?
There's Gum Bushcraft is our website. It's bluegumbushcraft.com.au. That's probably the best way. You can email me
find
through
a
the
website.
site. Yeah.
Lee, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, bye.
All right. If you are still here, thank you so much for listening to this entire episode. If you got some value out of it, it would mean the world to me if you left a review on iTunes or shared it with your friends or family. Otherwise, I'll be putting up videos of this episode on Instagram and Facebook, so check it out there at Byron Dempsey or at Driven Young Podcast, and I'll see you on the next one.